Provided in the agenda is the conditional use packet for the request. It includes findings of facts that staff have created and recommended conditions from staff and planning commission when they reviewed this at their January meeting. So after multiple back and forth, working with the applicant on identifying if this type of use, specifically related to CAVA's, that proposed new use shall be conducted by a qualified transportation professional. And what that really does, it gives the board an opportunity to have essentially another bite at that apple. If this use were to change from CAVA, we would have an opportunity to require additional analysis to ensure that while it works for CAVA, it may not work for a Dunkin' Donuts type of business model. So that's where you have your extra teeth to require that additional review if the use were to change. Right now, the CAVA site with their business model, it is not going to result in, I think the last time we discussed this was a Chick-fil-A type of incident. And I wouldn't associate this at all with the Chick-fil-A type of incident that we have dealt with in Patton Township. It is 100%, I would say, more of the Starbucks on North Atherton. It's a tight site. There are a lot of uses and a lot of traffic coming here. They have done their due diligence and analysis to ensure that it would not result in that right now. And to note that as this pad, phase 2B, continues to develop, if there are other drive-through uses proposed, it's a conditional use for this zoning district entirely. So if there are any questions, please don't hesitate.
So Sutan, at this point, you need to reconvene the conditional use hearing that we continued at the February meeting.
Okay. So do I have a motion to just open back up, I guess, the conditional?
Elliot made the motion.
Second.
All right. Jenna, thanks for that presentation. Any, or update, I should say. Any questions, thoughts from the board? As Jenna, you had mentioned, as far as the land development, that's where more of like, I know the concerns about like traffic and stuff like that, that was voiced previously. That's where some of those things can be fine tuned.
Yeah, there are, it's very close to one another,
Okay.
Land development and the use. So, but there is a fine line, at least with Pennsylvania land use law, when it comes to a permitted use, a conditional use versus the land development. So I know the conditions that the planning commission noted with the handicap parking backing up into the drive-through lane, they have done their due diligence to try to even that out to ensure that there would not be those types of impacts. We have had our traffic engineer look at that to ensure that there would no be.
Very good. Very good.
Okay. Well, assuming this is going to be successful, there will eventually be a lot of pedestrians and bikes in this particular development. And so we'll have to watch for the conflicts that can develop between those uses and places like this. And this is just something we'll have to think about in the past. It's not really a question about this particular one, just something that we'll keep in mind in the future.
Good point, and I do want to say that is the benefit of conditional uses. There are conditions that need to be met by the applicant. So at any point in time, if those conditions aren't met, one of those is the conflict between pedestrians accessing the site, the uses, et cetera, that cannot be in conflict with cars, et cetera. So part of this process, if any of those conditions aren't being met down the road, the township has the ability to enforce those conditions and to ensure that they will be met in the entirety of the project, essentially. And for queuing and whatnot, if it is not able to be accommodated, given it's a very dense site, so that may be the reality. It will get to the point where there isn't going to be enough room. So like essentially with this CAVA, they will be locked in. So if there's a future drive-through use coming in, changes that may need to be done on the Kava site, that needs to be addressed, owner to owner of those two sites. Like, as a township, we can't say to Kava, oh, you've had this approved use, you've been here for 5 years, now we have another drive-through coming in, we're gonna have to like align and do all this stuff to your site. So essentially, they're locked in. However, with new uses that come in, they are going to have to meet all these conditions as well as the traffic and queuing analysis to ensure that there will be no adverse impacts to the rest of the site. And that is definitely going to determine where these uses can go.
All right, well, seeing no other, Supervisor Hajewski? Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
Elliot made that motion.
I'll second.
All right. So it is closed then. And so we have a motion listed in the agenda.
Yeah,
think
so
that's
what
the
you're
next-
going to do tonight is, your motion will be to direct myself to put together the findings of fact and a written decision, and then you will actually approve all of that at the April 9th meeting. So if you agree with the condition, you don't want to add any other conditions, you would make that motion, and then we would get that paperwork ready for the April 9th meeting for you to officially approve.
And so thank you for that. That's before we vote on that motion. I'm grateful for, industry coming into our space and, providing a somewhat a more novel service, to our residents. I think this is going to, work out really well. And, I'm really hopeful that, we get things right, with this so that. All right. Well, I will entertain. All right. Well, I will entertain that motion as listed in the agenda.
Elliot's making that motion. Yes, his arm up.
So moved.
Second.
All right. We have a motion, seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions? Motion passes. All right, moving forward, public safety, there are no items. I think that's a good thing, hopefully. Unless there's a secret operation we're not aware of, and we'll hear about that next month. Shifting down to public works, operations, again, no items. And now we move to engineering, planning, and zoning. So R4 zoning proposal.
So if you remember at our last meeting, Elliot Killian presented a proposal to the board that would create an R4 zoning district in the township. Mr. Killian's proposing this high-density residential zoning district as an alternative to our current R3 medium zoning district, and he's proposing it as a way to help promote more attainable housing within the township. He's proposing some new things under the zoning, which would be increased density. This would allow for buildings up to 55 feet, which is 5 stories, compared to the 35 feet that's currently permitted in the R3 zoning. It would also enable the development of approximately 71 apartments per acre, housing up to 142 residents. Smaller parking requirements, reducing the parking requirements to 1.5 spaces per apartment from 2 spaces in the R3, providing a bus transit centers located on the property or within 1,000 feet. So this would help incentivize the use of public transit. Efficient land use, R4 allows for higher lot coverage for buildings compared to 25% in R3, and looking at some more modern amenities. I will say that last time we talked about, and I talked to Supervisor Whitman today, she wasn't able to be at the meeting tonight, but she's very much in support of the board sending this to the Planning Commission for some further consideration. The one challenge with this is going to be, we don't have a lot of land left where an R4 zoning district could go. And a lot of our land is also tied up within planned communities. So I had suggested to Supervisor Whitman that maybe one of the things the Planning Commission could do is to consider looking at the pieces of this that they like and see if we could add it into the planned community regulations or maybe the R3 regulations and kind of take these pieces, because I think there's some good thoughts here that Mr. Killian put together. And Mr. Killian is in the room if you have any questions for him. Elliot.
I realize that the thing I'm questioning is, okay, we're going to have smaller units and more of them. So, but why does that mean less cars? It seems that people will still have the same number of vehicles as they might, like in apartment houses, which are quite dense. And so why did we lower the requirement for parking?
Hello, my name is Elliot Killian. I reside in Ferguson Township on Harris Street. I wrote this report. If you have a parking requirement of one parking space per bedroom, and you have 5 stories or less, you'll find that the parking space requirement is larger than the living space. And so in my mind, this is absurd, that we have more space for parking than space for people to live in a bedroom. So I view that parking requirement is the main challenge to affordable housing. And then I had to think about how could we make it so that people can live and public transportation, incentivizing public transportation is one method. I think that there should be an expectation that we should shift on people that to reduce the idea that people need personal vehicles. That's one aspect. The other aspect is I believe that in the future we won't have personal vehicles. People will not own a personal vehicle because we'll have robot cars, we'll have an Uber-like service where we'll order robot cars, and we won't need a parking requirement. In the short term, yeah, we need a sort of a parking requirement for this transition. But those are the reasons why I was trying to suggest we reduce that parking requirement.
Oh, Elliot.
That may all happen, and it sounds good, but at the beginning of it, we might want to include more parking and then reduce it in a later development. Because, and if we find that we have a lot of open space, let's just plant extra flowers, plants, and trees in that space if we find we don't need it for actual parking.
I think there's something to be said for how people expect there to be parking when they go somewhere. If they know that they're going to have to pay $50, like when I go to New York City, it's $50 or more for a day of parking. I plan my trip around that. So I'll park somewhere else and use public transportation. So I think if we shift people's expectation of relying on having parking where they are, they'll adjust.
That may be, but in New York, there's high-density public transportation, and everything's close together, so there's lots of walking. And so that's a different situation than we have here.
Yeah, but we're debating of having free parking. If we had 2 options, we're discussing, should people have more parking availability or should people have affordable workforce housing? These are the types of things we're discussing. And I would say that the value of having affordable workforce housing is more important than having more parking options for people. But you're right, it's a good concern.
I mean, that's fine with us, sir.
I have, Elliot, if you want to stay up there, I think we have a resident on Zoom, Fedor. Sorry, let me take a step back. Sorry, Fedor. Just a second. Any other supervisors have any thoughts, questions right now? Supervisor Hycheski?
So I think this is also a chicken and egg situation. I'm here in Philadelphia right now, and I'm paying a lot of money for parking, and I did like an hour's worth of research trying to figure out how I could get here for this conference without doing that, and there just wasn't the public transportation availability. So I am all for having plans looking at this and looking to take what we can and moving toward the goals that have been set forth by this proposal. I agree that we need to move toward that, but I don't want to be in a situation where you have someone who has an affordable apartment but can't get to work. So it will be tricky, I think, making this happen the way we all want it to happen.
Because they may have multiple people living in that home. Might require multiple vehicles, yet don't have access to public transportation. And we know with CATA and cuts, to service routes, that is a potential concern. Supervisor Rob.
Yes. I want to thank Mr. Elliott Killian for the proposal, first of all. But I would like for us to send it to the Planning Commission for their review as well. And I like Amy's suggestion about intertwining it with our issue already on the board, on the books. There's some interesting reading in Mr. Killian's proposal, but I really would like for our planning commission to review this and bring back their recommendation as well as with our solicitor as well. But thank you.
I actually, and Fedora, before I still will recognize you, but how about we entertain a motion? And, I agree, Mr. Killian, I really appreciate the proposal, and I do think it's pretty progressive and forward-thinking, and something that I think it would be helpful for us to shift to. And so how about I'll entertain a motion actually to push this to the Planning Commission to review this R4 zoning proposal, and then we'll take public comments on it. So I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. All right, Fedor.
Hi, good evening. Just for the record, I'm stating that I'm a resident of Patton Township here in Park Forest Village. So I wanted to leave a comment on the R4 agenda proposal. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that we should be reducing parking requirements, if not just abolishing it outright, because it seems rather arbitrary to me. And this is we live in a Happy Valley, someplace that's more geographically constrained and dense. So I don't really understand the point of kind of just creating more surface area. It seems like the function of these parking requirements is more to de-densify developments rather than accommodate them. But honestly, I would just leave the parking to the developer. They should, I'm not a free market, let it all unleash type of person, but I do think it's in the developer's best interest to, figure out how much parking they need for a certain population. So I'm not really entirely sure why a township should be planning their parking for them. As we're seeing now, we're having an increase in, electric sort of orientated transport, like bikes, scooters. So, eventually time will come when this is just going to be inevitable. And I don't know, I feel like the longer you keep these parking minimums, the more you're just kicking the can down the road. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. I generally agree with Mr. Ethan K over there. Thank you.
Elliot has a question.
Well, I think once the big subway between where Lowe's is and South Atherton Street ends, the high-speed subway and railway that will be put in will probably take care of a lot of that. But that's all in the future too. And there should also be another high-speed access to the airport, things like that. We've talked about that before, never done it. And so any of these things are possible, but I think we still need to have some type of requirements, or else we won't have any parking there at all.
We do know in the center region, well, at least the State College area, parking has been of concern, having that availability. Okay. So we have a motion on the this R4 zoning proposal by Elliot Killian to Planning Commission for further review. Any further questions, discussion?
Elliot has his hand up.
Mr. Abram, Supervisor Abram.
Should whoever is looking at this next invite public participation, like to come to their meetings or not?
Yeah, this will be on the Planning Commission's public agenda, so people can participate in those discussions. Yep, absolutely.
If nothing else, then I guess we can vote on this motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Again, thank you, Elliot Killian, for that presentation, this proposal, and fielding some of these questions. All right, we will shift now to item number 7 in our administration, picking up where we left off, the discussion of adopting a resolution affirming the township's commitment to upholding constitutional law.
So we started this discussion back in February. So if you remember, in 2017, the board at that time had passed a resolution affirming its commitment to constitutional law and pledging that it would not engage in enable any unconstitutional, unlawful acts. At the February 12th meeting, we talked about, since the resolution is on the books, there's nothing more you need to do if you like the language in the resolution as it's stated. But we talked about how there was some concern raised about the last paragraph of the resolution, which states that the Board of Supervisors pledges not to enable any unconstitutional or unlawful act and directs the employees, agents, and contractors of the township not to enable any unconstitutional or unlawful acts. And the concern that was raised by Supervisor Magruder was that the sentence seemingly takes away discretion from dealing with matters, and where this matters is with our police department. So seemingly this would mean if I am going 15 miles over the speed limit, they don't have the discretion to say, please stop speeding and not give me a ticket. They would have to give me a ticket every time. Perhaps 15 miles is not the best example, however. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit more, and I would say that one possible solution to deal with that concern is simply to take that last paragraph out and then to adopt a new version of this resolution. But Tyler is prepared to talk about it, answer any questions that you have, and I know Supervisor Magruder, I think, has done a fair bit of thinking about this resolution and what we might want to do to move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Amy, and I know I singled out law enforcement at the last meeting when I was thinking about this, and that was because it was just more readily available information, but we could take this to like pollution, people polluting, or other sort of related, issues that are established law. And, one thinking through what our roles actually are and, are we equipped to determine what is or is not like lawful? I guess we can read things, but again, some things are up to interpretation. And so not being in the law profession, not being in some of these other professions who really deal with law and following that, can we necessarily say we know what laws mean and we're able to necessarily enforce that. Additionally, again, and I'm trying to work with one screen here, but yeah, that last paragraph pledges not to enable any unconstitutional law or action and directs employees, agents, and contractors not to enable any unconstitutional or unlawful acts. And so again, there too, it's sort of stipulating that we have control over other entities, maybe even outside of, just our staff at the township, and dictating, what laws or guidances they sort of like follow when, again, I'm not sure that that's our place. And if it is our place, if we think it's our place, I don't know if that's actually, doable for us to actually have a lot of enforcement on those types of matters with all the different agents and stakeholders that we do business with or have interactions with as part of township operations. So I'd like the remedy of just removing that last paragraph. At the end of the day, again, we have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and I think having it sort of like listed there is fine. It's just I think that last paragraph is where I felt like I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with that last paragraph, given the enforcement sort of like language that we are taking responsibility for when I'm not sure that we actually have that. So that's what I have there. I know, Chief, you're here to answer any questions and stuff too. Again, I didn't want to make law enforcement the lightning rod for this, but it was just an easily accessible example. So any questions, thoughts from the rest of the board? And then we'll open it up to if there's any public comments, residents who have thoughts on this too.
Elliot has his hand up.
Supervisor Abrams.
So I like the basic idea of it, but what part of it will possibly be enforceable? Or is this a guideline?
So resolutions typically aren't laws like ordinances. So you're right, it's more of a guideline than it is an enforceable law by the township.
I like that
Yeah.
idea.
Sorry, say that again, Supervisor Abrams.
He said he likes that idea, that it's not an enforceable law, it's more of a guideline.
Well, we know so I thought we were all on the same page when it comes to resolutions, that you had sort of like guidelines, but again, I think the language in that last paragraph, if I'm not mistaking the confusion here, it says we pledge to not enable any unconstitutional, pledge to not enable, and directs employees, agents, et cetera, not to enable. And so with that, this goes beyond just a sort of like aspiration or ideal. It's the language there is stipulating that there is some action that we are going to be taking. And so for me, I think it was that piece that felt like does not necessarily belong in a resolution, which is more sort of aspirational, or sort of like values and ideals. So for me, stripping that last paragraph seems like it would be sufficient. And does that make sense, Supervisor Abrams, what I'm saying?
He's shaking his head yes.
Any other supervisors' thoughts, questions? Does that feel like it makes sense to strip that last paragraph?
I agree. And I would also like to hear what Chief has to say on that aspect. But I agree with you on there, that we can strip that last paragraph. But also I would like to hear comments from the Chief as well.
Ready for me now? Okay. Yeah, so, obviously, this is at the board's pleasure. Whatever you all decide, I'm fine with personally. Just like the board members, all the police officers take an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution, the Pennsylvania Constitution, to enforce the laws of the state of Pennsylvania, and also the ordinances for the township of Patton that are enacted by our elected officials. So I'm comfortable with that last line being removed. You know, I don't really have a strong feeling either way on that. That's up to the board, really. So that's where I stand.
Supervisor Harjeski, any thoughts?
I'm happy with that solution as well. I think it removes kind of possibility of a misinterpretation.
And Supervisor Robin, you said you wanted to hear from Chief. Was that satisfactory?
Oh, yes.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah. No members of the public? Anyone in the boardroom?
No, not seeing anyone.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks for entertaining me all with that. I know semantics. But again, I think words are really important, and I just want to make sure that, yeah, there's just fidelity to what we're purporting and aspiring to, and yeah, so thanks for entertaining me with that. And so I think Amy, maybe in a future meeting, then we can update this resolution, just stripping that last paragraph and having something for the board to vote on. I think that would be the next step.
Yes, I'll have that ready for your April 9th meeting for you to vote on.
All right. Thank you so much. Next item, appointment to, nope, we don't have that one. All right, skipping that, consent agenda. So a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Great.
So moved.
Elliot made a motion.
Okay.
I didn't hear that.
Here, a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, approval of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? All right, motion passes. All right, item number 9, manager's report.
So I just wanted to take a moment to just go through the storm event that we had on March 16th. We had pretty significant issues from that storm event. The storm caused down power lines. There were, I believe, 14 power poles that were down along Fillmore Road, which caused some issues, and trees throughout the county. Our hardest hit areas were in tough trees near the airport and north and west along Route 550. I have to shout out our Center Region Emergency Management Coordinator, Jonathan Risley. He was excellent at responding to this incident. He was in constant communication with not just us, but with all of the municipalities in the Center Region. He also worked with the State College Borough Water Authority to set up a fill station for residents. The residents that didn't have water largely were on, or didn't have power, were largely on wells. So they didn't have water because they didn't have power to their wells. So we set up the fill site over at the Alpha Fire Station. The State College Borough Water Authority told us that that was the first time that fill station had actually been used. They had put it together. I met the person on their staff who had put it together, and it was wonderful. We did have some residents who stopped and gathered and got water for their homes through that. So a huge thank you to the Water Authority as well. Jonathan also had reached out to the YMCA because what we were hearing from residents is that they really wanted to take a hot shower and be able to charge their devices. So the YMCA graciously opened up all 4 of their locations in the county, and Jonathan doesn't have the number of people that went there, but people were able to use that resource. And we talked Tuesday at our Emergency Management Council meeting about how this might be the wave of the future in terms of not having just shelters for folks, because shelters have to be staffed, you have to be trained to do that. But having places, and we talked about all of our public buildings, where folks can come in, they can charge a device, if it's cold, they can get into some heat, get some water, and just sort of decompress and relax a little bit before they go back to their homes. So that, I think, was a big hit. And then West Penn, and I'm very disappointed because our contact from West Penn is no longer with the company, but he did such a wonderful job during the storm. He communicated more than probably we've gotten a lot of communication from West Penn in the last year. He was great. Every day we had an update on the number of outages that we had. We had an issue with a resident out in the 550 area that didn't have power, that had some very dire needs, and he worked very hard to make sure that person got power back. So I was sad to hear from Jonathan this afternoon that he's no longer with West Penn, but West Penn was a great help through the storm. So we're really, really pleased with the overall outcome. We did discuss at emergency management that we're going to do an after action and kind of talk about communication and some other things and see if there are ways we can tighten up our response just a little bit. We haven't, thankfully, had a big storm like that probably since 2017 when we had some straight line winds that came through. But that storm, I think, really showed us how far we've come in terms of dealing with our emergency management issues in the area. So I was really pleased with that. And if you have any questions about the storm, I'd be happy to answer them. Supervisor Robb.
Amy, is it possible, and Chair Magruder, if it's possible, can we as Patton Township give Jonathan Reesley something, a letter of appreciation for not just doing his job, but going above and beyond? I know Jonathan not only because he is the EMT coordinator, he is also a dedicated veteran. And you could see his dedication through this storm. So to let him know that Patton Township truly appreciated him working with Amy and keeping us abreast of what was going on and going above and beyond for not only our residents, but for all the residents in Center Region.
Yeah, you guys definitely could do that. I could write a letter for you if you want, and you can take a look at it, and then we can have Supervisor Magruder sign it and send it off.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Supervisor Abrams.
I think that's a great idea, and in fact, I think we should think about whether we want to have another category of award for special situations, just like we sometimes expand them. We just take for granted other types of things, and maybe we shouldn't take them for granted.
Yeah, that can definitely be worth a larger discussion for sure. Yeah, Supervisor Robb, I think that's a really good idea to find something more meaningful, I guess, than just sort of like words. So something more tangible would be helpful to recognize Jonathan in these efforts.
Okay. And then the only other thing I have is just a reminder that our local government open house, which is the public's opportunity to come and meet the Board of Supervisors, also meet Graf, see a fire truck, and Jonathan will actually be at that as well, will be held on April 17th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. I'm also trying to get the ice cream truck to stop by to make it a little more festive.
Thanks for all y'all's planning on that, Amy and staff, and I know the supervisors, if we can get some things updated with respect to our buyers and get that back to Sylvie, that would be greatly appreciated. Anything else, Amy?
Nope, that's it for me.
Sweet. All right, well,
Supervisor Magruder.
Yep.
Amy, I just need to, since we don't have a contact, since we've lost Jason from First Energy, is there anybody that they're putting as a substitute for him at this point?
So according to Jonathan, this was all very new, that this just happened, so he was working on trying to figure out who that contact would be, because ironically, I was about to email Jason on another matter today, so hopefully we'll have a new person in place or know who we're going to contact here soon.
Yeah, because he just did a presentation for the public safety, and I have all his information, so for us on the public safety committee as well, we would be looking to hear who his replacement is ASAP.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Amy, being at that emergency management meeting, I don't know if we can discuss some of the stuff here. But with respect to the after action sort of like analysis, and I know that there was some curiosity about better ways of communicating. I guess I was just trying to better understand where that was coming from, but it seemed like the discussion veered toward a potential issue with the high volume of calls and sort of like priority, how to respond, how to prioritize sort of like responses. Is that where that kind of was, the request for better, more communication and timely
Yeah.
responses? Did I hear that right?
I think that was part of it. I think part of it too is, and this is something that has historically been an issue we've kind of struggled with, when there are PennDOT roads involved in whatever disaster that we're dealing with, sometimes we don't have the best communication back to PennDOT. So for example, Fillmore Road and out by the airport was closed for the better part of last week because of the power poles being down. And we got a request from the airport probably on Wednesday or Thursday, asking if we could put up detour signs. And so that's not our road. None of those roads out there are our roads. So I asked Glenn to call the local PennDOT staff to find out if they could, put up detour signs or do something, and then the power poles were put back. But I think the issue that was discussed at the Emergency Management Council meeting dealt somewhat with the road, because again, that was a state road, I believe, that the issue that occurred on that was specifically mentioned, I think Pine Grove Mountain. So I think there was some concern about, had we known sooner, our crews could have responded faster to put up, road closed signs and maybe headed off some of the issues that happened throughout the region. So and like I said, that's very typical when you have so many different entities involved. So the after action is a really good way to sit down and kind of iron out some of these issues and make sure. I know when I was over on the other side of town with 322, when 322 gets closed, it's like this huge detour that has to be put in place. And there was a meeting of the minds with all the municipalities, PennDOT, the fire companies, and the police departments out there, and the state police to talk about who has what resource. And it sounds like we probably need to have that conversation as a whole in the center region, so that if we have issues again that involve state roads, we can say, Patton Township can go out and we can put up detour road closed signs right away until PennDOT can respond. And I think a lot of that was the issue, was the communication back and forth wasn't great with some aspects of the storm.
Thanks for that clarity. And would we be able to be reimbursed for any preemptive services we offer prior to, I know we want to be good partners and.
So that's an interesting question too, because you also heard the rest of the discussion at the meeting about the Emergency Management Contingency Fund, which we had set up eons ago, and which has $113,000 in it. And that was set up specifically for if there has to be an immediate response, and we're sending something out on behalf of a municipality, we get the money back, because we don't always meet the threshold to get money from FEMA or PEMA. So that's something that we can also discuss. I know in the issue with 322, the PennDOT actually provided resources to the fire companies so that if the road had to be closed right away, the fire company had those resources to pull out, because the fire companies didn't have that before.
It's not behaving.
Elliot's phone is talking too, that's why we're smiling.
Okay. Supervisor Rob?
Amy, on your meeting, I know we've had problems from the Public Safety Committee when Sean was talking to PennDOT, that they did not communicate a lot of times with our fire and EMS. Are they still having that problem? And also on what Jason referred to was because of the slow response that they were shorthanded of linemen and having to call in out of town help. That was one of the reasons why a lot of our municipalities were having slow response.
Yeah, and some of the issue with this last storm is that West Penn's service area west of us was also very hard hit by the storms. So they didn't have a lot of resources, and to their credit, they called in contractors to come help them, linemen from out of the area to come help them, and they had a pretty good turnout of people to help them in our area, but they were, I think, taxed because of the storm hitting west of us first. The communication issues with PennDOT, it's always been, they communicate, but it's their response times, like if you have to close a road, their response times can be a bit to get somebody to come, and then you end up with fire police standing out trying to guard a road that's closed, and that's an issue because the fire police certainly are volunteers. So it's getting better. I mean, I would say years ago it was probably a lot worse. It's getting better, but I think, again, there's all new players in some of these roles as well. So sitting down, and I think the after action, and I hate that we had this storm, but it's also a good way for us to sit down and go through the response and see how we can kind of button up those areas where we have some concerns.
Thank you.
All right. Well, moving on, if there's nothing else, committee reports. Any board members wish to provide an update on their meetings?
I apologize. Was a little under the weather, but I'll follow up. And our next meeting's not until next month. So thank you.
No worries. All right. Nothing else. Moving on. Other business. I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second. Do we need a second?
You have a motion and a second. So
Yeah.
you can go ahead.
Thank you all for your patience and those who were pushing sickness to be here today. Very appreciated, as well as travels and stuff like that. So we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care all.
Bye.